Today we're going to learn how to graph lines that are in slope-intercept form. You should be on page 68 in your notes packet. To graph a linear equation, the first thing you need to do is always plot the y-intercept. Next, you use the slope to find at least one more point. Then connect the points with a line and put arrows on each end to indicate that it is a line. Now, to be able to do that, remember that your equation must be in the form y equals mx plus b, where m represents slope and b represents the y-intercept. This means that in your equation, y must be on one side of the equal sign by itself. Let's look at our first example. This says x minus y equals 5. In order for me to be able to graph this, I need to have y by itself. But when I say that, I mean on the left side or the right side of the equal sign. Right now, I see that there is an x with y. So I need to get x onto the other side of the equation. Since this is a positive x, I'm going to do the inverse, which is a negative or subtracting x, which I'm going to do on both sides of the equation. X minus x will cancel. Now we have to be careful here because I'm not actually left with y. You see that there is a minus sign in front of the y, which tells us that we're actually left with a negative y. On this side, I have 5 minus x. That cannot be simplified because 5 and x are not like terms. So I can write this as 5 minus x. Or I could keep this the negative y equals, and some people like to have the variable first. And if I did that, I could write it as, since that x is a minus x, I could say negative x. And since the 5 is a positive 5, I could say plus 5. Both of these would be acceptable. Now, in this case, you see that y is actually still not by itself. It's much closer, but it still has a negative sign with it. Remember that when there's just a negative sign in front of a variable, there's really an invisible 1 in front of that variable. So in order to get y by itself, I need to get rid of the negative 1. So I need to divide by negative 1 on both sides of this equation. My negative 1's here will cancel, and now I'm left with y equals. Now remember, on the right side of the equation, when I'm dividing by negative 1, I need to divide every term by that negative 1. So positive 5 divided by negative 1 gives me negative 5. Then this is a negative x. So remember, this is an invisible negative 1 in front of the x as well. This is negative 1x divided by negative 1. Well, negative 1 divided by negative 1 is positive 1. So that means I'm going to write plus, and since it's a 1x, I'm going to write just x instead of 1x. I could have done the same thing over here, divided by negative 1 on both sides, and I would have gotten y equals. Well, negative 1x divided by negative 1 is positive 1x, or just x. Positive 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5, so I would write minus 5. Both of these equations say the same thing. Now we need to use this to plot our line on our graph. Well, you need your y-intercept first. Remember, your y-intercept is the constant value, the b. So in this case, we see a negative 5 that is a constant. So our y-intercept is negative 5. Our slope is the number that is being multiplied by x. Well, we don't see anything being multiplied by x. But again, we know that if there's nothing there, there's really an invisible 1. The thing about a slope is that when you're using it on a graph, in order for you to graph, slope needs to be in the form rise over run so that you know what direction to move. When you have a whole number for a slope, in order for you to use it for a graph, you want to put it over 1 because 1 divided by 1 is equal to 1. So it's not changing the value of the slope, but it's putting it in a format where you can use it to graph. Now that I have the y-intercept and the slope, I'm going to put this on my graph. My y-intercept is negative 5, so I'm going to go down to negative 5 on my y-axis, and I'm going to put a point. My slope is 1, but remember that's 1 over 1. Since that's a positive 1 as a rise, I'm going to move up 1, And since my run is +1, I'm going to move right 1, and then I can have another point. Now, it's important to know that this is the same as saying -1 over -1, because a -1 divided by a -1 is also a +1. So I could have, from my original point, I could have also gone down 1 for my rise and left 1 for my run. And you'll see that this would still create the same line. So now that I have at least 2 points, I can connect them with a line and put arrows on my line. Number 2 says 2x plus 3y equals 12. We want y by itself, so the first thing we need to do is get rid of our 2x. That's a positive 2x, so we are going to subtract 2x from both sides of this equation. 2x minus 2x cancels to leave us with positive 3y, and then we have 12 minus 2x. Y is still not by itself, so we need to get rid of our 3. So to get rid of our 3, we're going to divide by 3 on both sides of this equation. Our 3's will cancel to leave us with y equals. Well, now remember we have to divide every term by this 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then if you think about negative 2x divided by 3, I cannot divide negative 2 by 3 and get a whole number. So instead, I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. And what I'm going to do is call this negative 2 divided by 3. Well, a negative divided by a positive is a negative, so the whole fraction should be negative. And then I need to put my x with it. So to write that here, since the fraction was negative, I would say minus 2/3 x. Now that my equation has a y by itself, I'm going to find my y-intercept. Well, in this case, my y-intercept is 4 because that's the constant value that is by itself. And then I also need to find my slope. My slope is the coefficient of x. Well, my slope is this not 2/3, but because of the minus sign, it is a negative 2/3. Now, remember that that negative could be on the -2, or technically, even though we would never write it like this, it could be on the -3. Because in both of these situations, you have a negative divided by a positive or a positive divided by a negative, which gives you a negative answer. Since our y-intercept is 4, that's the first thing we're going to graph. So we'll go up to +4 on our y-axis. Then, since our slope is -2/3, if I start with -2 over 3, then that means that I have a rise of -2. That means I would go down 2 units. Then I have a run of +3. Since that run is positive, I would move right 3 units. And that would put a point right here. Now remember, that's the same as doing +2 over -3. So if I had gone back to my y-intercept, if I had a rise of +2, I would have gone up 2, and a run of -3 means I would have gone left 3. So I would have these points, which I could then connect with a line and put arrows on. Number 3 says 3x plus 5y equals 15. We want to first get rid of 3x. These will cancel to leave us with 5y equals, and then we have 15 minus 3x, or you could write -3x plus 15. To get y by itself, we need to divide by 5. Our y will be left by itself, and then we have to divide by 5 for every term here. 15 divided by 5 is 3. And then this is -3x divided by 5. Now remember, this is a negative divided by a positive, so the whole fraction will be negative. And 3/5 would turn into a decimal, so we're just going to leave it as 3/5 so that we have a rise and a run. And we're going to put our x with it. Since that's negative, I'm going to write -3/5 x. Another way to have written this equation would have been y equals -3/5 x plus 3. From here, I need my y-intercept. Well, my y-intercept is that constant value that is by itself, which is this +3. The slope is the coefficient of x, so the number being multiplied by x, which is -3/5. Now, remember that -3/5 means that the -3 could be, or that the 3 could be negative, or that the 5 could be negative, but not both, because if both were negative, a negative divided by a negative would give us a positive. But you see that our slope is negative, so we need to have one negative and one positive. To graph this, I'm going to start at my y-intercept of 3, so I'll go up to 3 and put a point. Then I'll use negative 3 over 5. Since I have a run of negative 3, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, or a rise of negative 3, I'm sorry. I'll go down 3, and then a run of positive 5 means I would move right 5. I could have also used positive 3 over negative 5, which means I would have had a rise of up 3. And then because the run is negative, I would have moved left 5. And you can see that this would still create the same line. So anywhere on that line, it's going to have that same slope, and we can continue in either direction. Number 4 says negative 5x plus 2y equals negative 10. Well, the first thing we need to do is get rid of negative 5x. And since it's a negative 5x, the inverse is adding 5x, which we will do on both sides of this equation. Then we're left with positive 2y, and we have negative 10 plus 5x on this side. To get y by itself, we need to divide by 2 on both sides. Our 2's cancel to leave us with y equals, and negative 10 divided by positive 2 is negative 5. Then we have 5x divided by 2. Well, again, that would give us a decimal, so we'll just leave it as 5 over 2. Now, since it's positive, we're going to write plus 5 over 2x. Another way to have written this would have been positive 5 over 2x minus 5, since that 5 was negative. From here, we need our y-intercept. Well, our y-intercept is this constant value, which is negative 5. And then we need our slope. Our slope is this coefficient of x, so it's 5 halves. Now it's positive. So another way to write this is actually negative 5 over negative 2, because a negative divided by a negative will still give me a positive value. To graph this, I'll start with my slope, which was negative 5. My y-intercept, which was negative 5. So I'll go down to negative 5 on my y-axis. Since the slope is 5 halves, and those are both positive, that means it has a rise of positive 5. So I'll move up 5, and then a run of positive 2. So I'll move right 2. That was the same as negative 5 over negative 2. So if I started back at the y-intercept, I also could have gone a rise of negative 5, which is down 5, and a run of negative 2, which is left 2. I can connect these points and make a straight line, and you can see that those would be on the same line. All right, for number 5, we see 2y equals 20 minus 4x. You can see that you should get the equation y equals negative 2x plus 10. To get that, all you would do is divide by 2 on both sides, which would cancel these 2, so you're left with y. 20 divided by 2 gives you a positive 10, and negative 4 divided by positive 2 gives you negative 2 times x. Now, you would take this, and you need your y-intercept. Your y-intercept is this positive 10, and then you need your slope. Well, your slope is the coefficient on x, which is this negative 2. Well, that's negative 2, but remember, we need rise over run. So if we have a whole number or an integer, we would put a 1 under that number. So our slope is really negative 2 over 1. Another way of writing that is positive 2 over negative 1. Both of these would make a negative value for our slope. So to graph this, I'm going to start by going to positive 10 on my y-axis and putting a point for my y-intercept. If I use negative 2 over 1, that means I have a rise of negative 2, so I would move down 2 units, and then a run of positive 1, so I would move right 1 unit. I also could have used positive 2 over negative 1, so I would have a rise of positive 2, so up 2, and then a run of negative 1, so I would move left 1. Then I can connect these points with a line and arrows. Number 6 says 4x equals 12 plus 3y. Well, again, remember we want y to be by itself. So when we look over here, y is on the right side this time. So we need to get rid of actually the 12 instead of trying to work with our x. So since that's a positive 12, we're going to subtract 12 from both sides. 4x and 12 are not like terms, so we can just write this as 4x minus 12. 12 minus 12 cancels, and we're left with positive 3y. Now, y is still not by itself, so we need to divide by 3 on both sides. Well, this is 4 over 3x, so that's 4/3 x. And then it's a negative 12 divided by positive 3. Negative 12 divided by positive 3 is negative 4, so I'm going to put minus 4. My 3's cancel to leave us with y. So our equation is 4/3 x minus 4 equals y. Now we'll use this to find our y-intercept. Well, our y-intercept is that constant value, which is this minus 4, so negative 4. Our slope is the coefficient of x, so it's this 4/3. Now that is a positive 4/3, so another way to write that is negative 4 over negative 3, because a negative divided by a negative still gives me a positive. To graph this, I'm going to go to negative 4 on my y-axis. If the slope is 4/3, then that's a rise of positive 4, so that's up 4, and a run of positive 3, so that's right 3. I also could have used negative 4 over negative 3. So if I'd started here, I could have gone down 4 and then left 3. And then I can connect these points with a line. For 3x minus 9y equals 27, you should get an equation that says y equals 1/3 x minus 3. When you go to graph, you have a y-intercept here of negative 3, and you have a slope of positive 1/3, which is the same as negative 1 over negative 3. Since the y-intercept is negative 3, we'll move down 3. And then since the slope is positive 1 over positive 3, that's up 1 and then right 3. Or I could have gone down 1 and left 3. Number 8 says x plus 2y equals 8. We want y by itself, so you want to get rid of your x, and then you want to get rid of your 2, and you should end up with an equation that says y equals negative 1/2 x plus 4, or you could have an equation that says y equals 4 minus 1/2 x, and they're the same thing. Your y-intercept for this is positive 4, and your slope is negative 1/2. So the negative 1 could be your rise, or you could have a positive 1 with a negative 2 as the run. To graph this, I'll go up to positive 4. Then for my slope, I would go down 1 and right 2, or I could go up 1 and left 2. For number 9, I have negative y equals 18 minus 6x. Remember, if you see this, y is not by itself. Y has an invisible negative 1, so you would really need to divide by negative 1 on both sides of this equation. When you do that, you will get an equation that says y equals positive 6x minus 18. Or your equation might have said y equals negative 18 plus 6x, but they say the same thing. The y-intercept in this case is negative 18, and the slope is positive 6. So since the y-intercept is negative 18, I'll go down to negative 18. Now the slope is positive 6. So remember, we want to write that as 6 over 1. Since that's a positive 6, I would move up 6 units, and then positive 1, I would move right 1. Now, I also could have written this as negative 6 over negative 1, but if I went down 6, I would run out of space on my coordinate plane. So I can just use these 2 points and connect them with a line. Number 10 says 2x plus y equals 7. Well, you want to subtract 2x from both sides here, and then you're going to get an equation that says y equals negative 2x plus 7, or you might have had y equals 7 minus 2x. You're going to start with your y-intercept, or b, which is positive 7, and then your slope, or m, which is negative 2. And remember, we write negative 2 as negative 2 over 1. We also could write it as positive 2 over negative 1 because both of these give us a value of negative 2. To graph, we're going to go up to positive 7. And then we have a negative 2 over positive 1, so that's a rise of down 2 and a run of right 1. Or a rise of up 2 and a run of left 1. Now turn the page and let's look at some points that we can graph. When you're given 2 points, you can make an equation by finding slope, substituting x and y values from the ordered pairs and slope into the formula y equals mx plus b, then solving for b. Rewrite the equation as y equals mx plus b and fill in the slope in the y-intercept only. The good thing about these is that you're given 2 ordered pairs. So when you're given that, all you would have to do, you don't even have to have the equation to actually graph it. You can graph just the ordered pairs that you are given. But in order for you to know the equation or the y-intercept or the slope, you need to do these steps. Number 1 says find the equation of the line that goes through the points 0, 8, and negative 1, 10. Well, again, our first step is to find slope. So remember that to find slope, we always use our formula y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Well, our first point is going to be x sub 1 and y sub 1. Our second point will be x sub 2 and y sub 2. So I'm going to do 10 minus 8 over negative 1 minus 0. 10 minus 8 is 2, and negative 1 minus 0 is negative 1. Well, positive 2 divided by negative 1 gives us negative 2. So we know we have a slope of negative 2. Then we have to find our y-intercept. Now, our y-intercept is where it can get a little bit tricky. You want to find your y-intercept, and in this case, it's not tricky because this point is your y-intercept since x is 0. But since you don't know that for every ordered pair, I'm going to show you how to find the y-intercept. You're going to take any point that you are given. So in this case, I'll just take 0 and 8. I'm going to plug that into my formula for the slope-intercept of a line, which is y equals mx plus b. In this case, the y value from my ordered pair is 8. So instead of writing y, I'm going to replace that with 8. We know that m represents slope. Well, we found that the slope is negative 2. So I'm going to say negative 2 for m, and then it's going to be times x. Well, I'm going back to the same point that I used before. The x value in this point is 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x. Because this says m times x, I'm doing negative 2, which was m, times 0, which was x. Then I just write the rest of the equation, which is plus b. We're looking for b because the point of this is to find the y-intercept. Then I'm going to multiply negative 2 times 0, so I'm leaving 8. Negative 2 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus b is what I have on this side of the equation. Well, 0 plus what gives me 8? Well, I know that b must be 8 because 0 plus 8 equals 8. So once I know that the slope is negative 2 and the y-intercept is 8, I can put that into an equation. So the equation, remember, is always in that form, y equals mx plus b. Well, m is slope, so negative 2 times x. My b is 8, so since it's positive, I'm going to put plus 8. So this is the equation of this line. Number 2, find the equation of the line that goes through 4, 5 and negative 3, 8. Again, we start with slope. This is x sub 1 and y sub 1. This is x sub 2 and y sub 2. So we always do y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I'm going to start with y, 8 minus 5 over x, so negative 3 minus 4. Well, 8 minus 5 is 3, and negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. So positive 3 over negative 7 means that I have a slope that is negative. So it's a negative 3/7 as my slope. Then I need to find my y-intercept. Well, I'm going to plug in a point, so I'm going to start with 4 or 5. If I use my y equals mx plus b, the y value here is 5. M is negative 3/7 times x, which is 4, and then plus b. Well, this looks confusing because it's fractions, but you can put it in your calculator and let your calculator do this for you. If you do negative 3/7 times 4, you're going to get negative 12/7, or your calculator might say negative 1 and 5/7. And then it's plus b. Well, this is just an equation that needs to be solved, and b needs to get by itself. Since it has negative 12/7 with it, we're going to add 12/7 on both sides. So positive 5 plus 12/7. Again, put it in your calculator. Let your calculator do the work. So if you do positive 5 plus 12/7, you're going to get 47/7. These will cancel to leave you with y, or b, I'm sorry. So your equation is going to be y equals m, which is negative 3/7 x, plus, because this is positive, I'm using plus, 47/7. And yes, you leave them as fractions, you leave them as improper fractions. This is just the easiest way to write it. Number 3, find the equation that goes through 0, 8, and 2, 0. Well, you start with slope. So we know x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. We start with the y minus y, so 0 minus 8, and then x minus x, so 2 minus 0. Well, 0 minus 8 gives us negative 8, and 2 minus 0 gives us positive 2. Negative 8 divided by positive 2 is negative 4. So we have a slope here of negative 4. Then we need to find our y-intercept. In this case, you don't have to work. In this case, it's given to you because you know that your y-intercept is where x equals 0. So in this case, x is 0 and y is 8. So that means your y-intercept is 8. To write your equation, you say y equals m, so that's negative 4, x, and then plus b. Well, our b is positive 8, so I'll say plus 8. Number 4, we have negative 1, 7, and 8, negative 2. We're going to start with slope. So we have x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. So we'll do y minus y, negative 2 minus 7, over x minus x, so 8 minus negative 1. Well, negative 2 minus 7 is negative 9. 8 minus negative 1 is positive 9. Negative 9 divided by positive 9 is negative 1. Now we need to find y-intercept. These points don't give you the y-intercept, so you've got to find it by plugging into the formula y equals mx plus b. So if I just choose one of my ordered pairs, the y value here is 7, so I'm going to plug that in for 7. My m is my slope, so it's negative 1, times the x value of negative 1, and then plus b. Well, negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1, and positive 1 plus b. Well, 1 plus what gives me 7? I know that 1 plus 6 gives me 7, so that means that b is 6. To write my equation, I'm saying y equals m, which is negative 1, times x, plus b. My b is positive 6, so I'm going to say plus 6. Another way to write this is to not write the negative 1, but to just write negative x plus 6. For number 5, we'll start with slope. So we have x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. We're going to do negative 1 minus 3 over negative 4 minus 0. Negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4, and negative 4 minus 0 is negative 4. Well, if I do negative 4 divided by negative 4, I get positive 1. Then I need my y-intercept. Well, in this case, it tells me the y-intercept because this is where x is 0. So when x is 0, y is 3, so my y-intercept is 3. Then I use all of that to make my equation, y equals slope times x. Well, that's 1x, which is the same as just x. Then plus my y-intercept. Well, my y-intercept is positive 3, so I'll write plus 3. Number 5, we're first going to start with our slope. So we're going to do negative 3 minus 2 over 1 minus 0. Negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5, and 1 minus 0 is 1. Negative 5 divided by positive 1 is negative 5. Our y-intercept is already given to us because x is 0 when y is 2. So our y-intercept is positive 2. Our equation is going to be y equals negative 5x plus 2. For number 7, we start with slope. So we're going to do 3 minus 4 over negative 4 minus 5. 3 minus 4 is negative 1, and negative 4 minus 5 is negative 9. Now, negative 1 over negative 9, we can't simplify that, but a negative divided by a negative is actually a positive. So we have a positive 1/9 as our slope. Then we plug for our y-intercept. We plug into our formula y equals mx plus b. Well, our y value is 4. Our m value is 1/9 times x, which is 5, then plus b. Well, 1/9 times 5 is just 5/9. So I have 5/9 plus b. Well, to get b by itself, I really just need to subtract 5/9 from both sides of this equation. And if I do 4 minus 5/9, then I'm going to get 31/9. These will cancel and leave me with b. So that means that 31/9 is my y-intercept. If I write this in my equation, it's going to be y equals my slope, which is 1/9 times x, plus my y-intercept, which is 31/9. Our last one, we're going to start with slope. So we're going to do 13 minus 1 over 12 minus negative 4. 13 minus 1 is 12, and 12 minus negative 4 is 16. Now, that would turn into a decimal, so I'm not going to do that, but I can simplify this. Both of these can be divided by 4. So this would leave me with actually 3/4. So I would have a slope of 3/4. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug for my y-intercept. I'm going to use my equation y equals mx plus b and plug these values in. If I choose my y value here, I'm going to have 1 equals, my m is 3/4 times x, which is negative 4. Then plus b. So we have 1 equals, well, negative 3/4, or I mean positive 3/4, I'm sorry, times negative 4 is going to give me negative 1. So I have negative 1 plus b. Well, I just need to get b by itself, so I need to get rid of negative 1 by doing the inverse, which is adding 1 on both sides. 1 plus 1 is 2, so that means b equals 2. To write that equation, I'm going to say y equals my slope, 3/4 times x, then my b, which is plus 2. And that should be 2, not 4.